There is a silence that comes before dawn, stillness that exists in the space between night and morning, where the world has not yet awakened to its chaos, its demands, its relentless noise. It is in this silence that the Stoic man begins his day, not because he must, but because he understands something that most never will, that emotional mastery is not built in moments of crisis, but in moments of peace. If you want to be untouchable, you must first become unreadable. The ancient Romans had a word for it, gravitas, that quality of seriousness, of depth, of unshakable presence that marked a man as someone who could not be moved by the petty storms of daily existence. Marcus Aurelius possessed it. Seneca embodied it. Epictetus, even as a slave, radiated it. These men understood that true strength is not measured by how hard you can strike, but by how little you can be struck. You live in a world that profits from your emotional reactivity. Every notification, every headline, every manufactured outrage is designed to pull you from your center, to make you dance to rhythms you did not choose. But there is another way, the way of the Stoic, the way of the man who has built such impenetrable inner armor that external circumstances cannot penetrate his peace. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about suppressing what you feel. This is about commanding what you feel, directing it with the precision of a master craftsman shaping steel. The Stoic does not feel nothing. He feels everything, still chooses strength. The path begins in darkness, in the sacred hours before the world stirs. While others sleep, surrendering their first moments of consciousness to the chaos of notifications and news, you rise. You enter the temple of your own solitude. This is not mere early rising. This is a philosophical ritual, declaration that your inner world will not be subject to external invasion. In this morning silence, you practice what the Stoics called attention to the present moment. You sit with yourself, not as entertainment, not as distraction, but as investigation. Who are you when no one is watching? What remains when you strip away the roles, the expectations, the masks you wear throughout the day? This is where emotional untouchability begins, in knowing yourself so completely that others cannot define you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But this power is not automatic. It must be cultivated, trained, strengthened like a muscle. And like any serious training, it requires discomfort. The ancient Stoics practiced what they called ascesis, spiritual exercise, through voluntary hardship. Not because they were masochists, but because they understood that comfort is the enemy of growth. When you deliberately expose yourself to cold, to hunger, to solitude, you are not suffering, you are conditioning. You are teaching your nervous system that discomfort is not danger, that pain is not panic. You can maintain your center even when circumstances conspire to steal it. Take a cold shower, not because you enjoy it, but because you can command yourself to do it. Fast for a day, not as punishment, but as practice. Spend time alone without distraction, without stimulation, without the constant input that modern life demands. In these moments of voluntary discomfort, you discover something profound. You are stronger than you believed, more resilient than you imagined, more in control than you ever dared hope. Seneca would regularly practice poverty, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food, wearing rough clothes. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, yet he understood that attachment to comfort creates vulnerability. The man who needs luxury to be happy is a slave to luxury. The man who can find contentment in simplicity is free, but strength without awareness is merely brute force. The Stoic cultivates a different kind of power, the power of observation. Each evening, Marcus Aurelius would write in his journal, not as therapy, not as venting, but as examination. He would observe his thoughts, his reactions, his emotional responses with the detachment of a scientist studying specimens. This is the practice of self-awareness that creates emotional distance. When you can observe your anger rather than be consumed by it, when you can watch your fear rather than be paralyzed by it, you begin to understand that you are not your emotions. You are the one who experiences them. And if you are the experiencer, then you have choice over how to respond. Write down what happened today, but do not write as a victim of circumstances. Write as an observer of your own experience. What triggered you? Why? What assumptions did you make? What stories did you tell yourself? Look at your emotional reactions. The way a doctor looks at symptoms with curiosity, not judgment. Epictetus, who knew slavery in the most literal sense, taught that freedom comes not from external circumstances, but from internal sovereignty. No one can hurt you without your permission, he said. This is not denial of difficulty. This is recognition of where your power actually lies. Not in controlling what happens to you, but in controlling how you interpret what happens to you. The Stoic practices what they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. This is not pessimism. This is preparation. The warrior who has mentally rehearsed every possible attack is not surprised when battle comes. The man who has contemplated loss is not destroyed when loss arrives. Spend time each day imagining what could go wrong. Your health could fail. Your relationships could end. Your wealth could disappear. Your reputation could be destroyed. Do not stop there. That would be mere anxiety. Go further. Imagine how you would respond. What would remain? What could not be taken? Your principles, your character. Your ability to choose your response when you have mentally walked through loss, actual loss, loses its power to devastate you. When you have rehearsed rejection, real rejection becomes merely information. When you have contemplated death, life becomes more precious, not less. This is the paradox of Stoic preparation. By accepting the worst, you become free to embrace the best. But knowledge without application is philosophy without power. The true test of Stoic training comes not in quiet moments of reflection, but in the heat of real interaction, real conflict, real provocation. This is where you discover whether you have built armor or merely polished theory. Someone insults you. Your first impulse is to defend, to attack, to prove them wrong. But there is a space, a sacred pause between stimulus and response. That space lives your freedom. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." The Stoic learns to widen that space, to take the breath, to feel the emotion without becoming the emotion, to respond rather than react. This is not suppression, this is mastery. The master of fire is not someone who cannot feel heat, but someone who can direct the flame. When someone speaks to you in anger, you have choices. You can match their energy, escalating the conflict. You can withdraw and hurt, giving them power over your peace. Or you can do something different. You can remain centered. You can listen not to their words, but to their pain. You can respond from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion. This is what it means to be emotionally untouchable. Not that nothing affects you, but that nothing controls you. The storm may rage around you, but at your center, there is stillness. Others may lose themselves in drama, but you remain anchored to something deeper, Seneca wrote. Every new thing excites the mind, but a mind that seeks the truth turns from the new to the eternal. In a world obsessed with reaction, with immediate response, with emotional display, the Stoic practices something revolutionary: restraint. Not the restraint of the coward, but the restraint of the master. You do not need to have an opinion about everything. You do not need to respond to every provocation. You do not need to defend yourself against every accusation. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Sometimes the greatest strength is displayed in silence. But there are times when withdrawal is not weakness but wisdom. The Stoic understands that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every argument is worth having. Not every drama is worth entering. There is a difference between courage and foolishness, between strength and stubbornness. When you find yourself in the middle of emotional chaos, whether it is family drama, workplace conflict, or social media outrage, you have a choice. You can add your voice to the noise, or you can preserve your energy for what matters. You can get pulled into the whirlpool, or you can stand on solid ground and offer your hand to those who are drowning. Walking away is not always retreat. Sometimes it is strategy. Sometimes it is self-preservation. Sometimes it is the most loving thing you can do for others and for yourself. The man who knows when to engage and when to disengage is the man who maintains his power for the battles that truly matter. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you can commit injustice by doing nothing. But he also understood that you can commit injustice by doing too much, by inserting yourself where you do not belong, by trying to control what is not yours to control. This brings us to the foundation of all Stoic practice, the discipline of desire, the understanding of what is truly yours and what is not. Epictetus taught that there are only three things that belong to you: your judgments, your actions, and your responses. Everything else, other people's behavior, natural disasters, economic markets, political outcomes, exists outside your control. Most human suffering comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled and neglecting what can be controlled. You worry about what others think of you, but you neglect to think clearly about yourself. You stress about market fluctuations, but you fail to manage your own spending. You rage about political decisions, but you ignore your own character development. Stoic inverts this equation. He focuses his energy on what he can actually influence: his thoughts, his choices, his responses. He lets go of everything else, not because he does not care, but because caring about what you cannot control is a waste of the energy needed to control what you can. This is not passivity. This is strategic focus. The archer who aims at everything hits nothing. The warrior who defends every position loses every battle. The man who tries to control everything controls nothing. But the man who controls himself controls everything that matters. When someone betrays you, you cannot control their choice, but you can control your response. When the economy crashes, you cannot control the market, but you can control your preparation and your attitude. When illness comes, you cannot always control the outcome, but you can control your courage and your grace. This is where emotional untouchability reveals its true nature. It is not about becoming invulnerable to panic. It is about becoming vulnerable to pain without being destroyed by it. It is about feeling the full range of human emotion while maintaining your center, your principles, your power to choose. The day ends as it began, in reflection. But this is not the reflection of regret or self-recrimination. This is the reflection of the scientist examining data. This is the reflection of the craftsman assessing his work. This is the reflection of the warrior learning from battle. Seneca would end each day by examining his conscience, not to punish himself for failures, but to learn from them. What wound did I heal today? What failing did I resist? What passion did I oppose? What inclination did I check? The body is benefited by medicines, the mind by advice. How much progress have I made? My vices decrease, my understanding increases. Look at your day without the lens of success or failure, but with the lens of learning. Where did you react instead of respond? Where did you try to control what was not yours? Where did you allow external circumstances to dictate your internal state? And where did you demonstrate mastery, or did you choose strength? Where did you embody the principles you claim to hold? This evening examination is not about perfection, it's about direction. The Stoic does not expect to master himself in a day, a month, or even a year. He understands that emotional mastery is a lifelong practice. It's a daily choice. It's a moment-by-moment decision to align with his highest principles rather than his lowest impulses. But he also understands that each day of practice makes the next day easier. Each moment of choosing response over reaction strengthens the neural pathways of wisdom. Each time he remains centered in chaos, he builds the foundation for greater stability. Each act of self-mastery increases his capacity for future mastery. The goal is not to become a statue, unmoved and unmoving. The goal is to become like water fluid, adaptable, powerful, but always flowing according to its own nature rather than being dammed or diverted by external obstacles. Water does not fight the rock, it flows around it. Water does not rage against the dam. It finds another way. Water is soft enough to nurture life and powerful enough to carve canyons. This is the nature of the emotionally untouchable man. He is not rigid, he is resilient. He is not cold, he is controlled. He is not unfeeling, he is undisturbed. He experiences the full spectrum of human emotion, but he is not enslaved by any of it. He feels anger without becoming angry. He experiences fear without being ruled by fear. He knows sadness without drowning in sorrow. Others may call this suppression, but they misunderstand the nature of true strength. The man who cannot feel is not strong, he is broken. The man who feels everything and is controlled by his feelings is not alive. He is reactive. But the man who feels everything and chooses his response, this is the man who has achieved something rare and precious, sovereignty over himself, in a world that rewards emotional display, monetizes outrage, that celebrates victims and punishes strength. The Stoic walks a different path. He does not perform his pain for applause. He does not broadcast his struggles for sympathy. He does not seek validation for his victories. He does his work in silence, builds his character in private, and lets his actions speak louder than his words. This is not about being better than others. It is about being better than you were yesterday. This is not about judgment of those who choose differently. It is about commitment to your own growth. This is not about perfection, it is about direction. The Stoic understands that reputation is what others think of you. Character is what you know about yourself. He understands that comfort is temporary, but strength is permanent. He understands that emotions are visitors, but principles are residents. He understands that circumstances change, but character endures. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he was not writing for publication. He was writing for himself, reminding himself of truths that were easy to forget in the chaos of ruling an empire. He reminded himself that external events have no power to disturb the soul unless we give them that power. He reminded himself that today he would meet with interference, gratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, but that these things could not injure him because his happiness depended on his own judgment, not the behavior of others. These were not philosophical abstractions to Marcus. These were practical tools for daily life. These were the habits that allowed him to remain centered while managing the complexities of leadership, the pressures of power, and the inevitable disappointments of human nature. Seneca, despite his wealth and position, regularly practiced poverty, to remind himself that his happiness was not dependent on his possessions. Epictetus, despite his physical limitations and harsh circumstances, maintained his dignity and taught others to find freedom in the only place it could never be taken, within themselves. These men were not perfect. They were practitioners. They were not immune to difficulty. They were prepared for it. They were not untouched by pain. They were undisturbed by pain. There's a crucial difference. The emotionally untouchable. Man does not live without feeling. He lives without being enslaved by feeling. He does not exist without challenges. He exists without being defined by challenges. He does not experience life without pain. He experiences pain without losing himself in pain. This is the deepest truth of Stoic practice, that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of choice within struggle. That peace is not the absence of storm, but the maintenance of center within storm. That freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the recognition of what cannot be constrained. Your thoughts belong to you. Your choices belong to you. Your responses belong to you. Everything else is on loan from the universe, temporary, subject to change. The man who builds his identity on what he owns will lose himself when he loses his possessions. Psst. The man who builds his identity on what others think will lose himself when opinions change. But the man who builds his identity on his principles, his character, his commitment to virtue, this man cannot be shaken, because what he is built upon cannot be taken. The world will test you. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will challenge you. Your own emotions will sometimes feel like enemies within your own walls. But if you have practiced, if you have prepared, if you have built the habits of emotional mastery into the foundation of your character, you will discover something that most never know, that you are stronger than anything that can happen to you. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because you can choose how to carry whatever hurt comes. Not because you are immune to loss, but because you know that what matters most cannot be lost. Not because you will never feel overwhelmed, but because you know how to find your center even in the storm. To be emotionally untouchable is not to feel nothing, it is to feel everything, still choose strength. That is the way of the Stoic. That is the path of the man who has decided that his inner world will not be subject to external chaos. That is the choice available to you right now, in this moment. Regardless of what has happened before or what may come after, the habits are simple. The practice is daily. The results are profound. Rise before the world wakes. Embrace discomfort as training. Observe your emotions as data. Prepare for difficulty. Pause before responding. Walk away from chaos when necessary. Control only what is yours. Reflect without judgment. These are not techniques, they are transformations. These are not tips, they are truths. These are not suggestions, they are invitations to a different way of being human. The invitation is always present. The choice is always yours. The time is always now.